Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. For those of you who may not know me, my name is Kayla Sipple, and I took the Positive Leadership course with the UP Center for Executive Education back in March of this year. So I am here today with Mohit Mukherjee, who facilitated the course that I took, along with Lars. Can't forget Lars. And he'll be facilitating the upcoming Positive Leadership course that starts on May 25th. He also just so happens to be the founder of the UP Center for Executive Education. Mohit, I'm excited to reconnect and to have the chance to chat and ask you some questions. My goal for this conversation is to learn more about your journey, how you got to be where you are today, and to gain some insight into who you are as a human being. And since we only have a half hour, I'm going to jump right in, if that's okay.
Perfect. All right. Thanks, Kayla.
Yeah, sounds good. So in Positive Leadership, we talk about the 5 pillars of well-being or flourishing. I learned that the first is positive emotions. Since one of the positive emotions is gratitude, my first question for you is, what is something you are deeply grateful for right now?
Wow. So firstly, great to have an opportunity to chat like this, Kayla, and love the opening question. You know, I think of gratitude sometimes as almost the superpower of positive emotions. And what am I feeling grateful for right now? So many things. The one maybe that I'll point to is earlier this morning, I had a chance to be part of a panel. It was broadcast in the Caribbean region, and it was called Pandemic of Performance. And the Caribbean region has been affected quite a bit through the pandemic, of course, for obvious reasons, but also a region highly dependent on tourism. And it was just a wonderful platform to be able to share a little bit about some of the things people can do at a personal level when facing adversity. And very specifically, I had a chance to talk a little bit about the appreciative inquiry process that starts with really thinking about one's strengths, and it's especially appropriate in times of change. And so I feel grateful for that opportunity. It really felt the other panelists were amazing speakers, amazing thinkers, and I felt that it gave me an opportunity not only to share something that I feel is very powerful and reach a lot of people, and I would say for me, the other thing I was most grateful for was just the learning that came from being part of this. The other panelists, one of whom was Tal Ben Shahar. He's someone who's really spent a lot of his professional life researching and writing about happiness. To hear him share some of his thoughts, so still feeling grateful for having had that opportunity.
Yes, that sounds awesome. Do you mind sharing what is one thing you would say you took away from learning about all the other panelists, people who presented?
Yeah, so I was just talking about Tal, and he said that we are going through periods of intense stress. And wherever you might be, the pandemic has, of course, affected everybody. And he said that actually even the statement of we are living in very, very busy times and we're taking on a lot was true before the pandemic too, especially now. And he said that stress is not a bad thing, right? When you think about how you build muscles, you put stress on them. But then the key to stress, and same with psychological stress, it's not a bad thing. It's just being able to recuperate. It's having periods of rest. Stress is what gets us up in the morning, right? And stress is what gets us to step out of our comfort zone and then expand our comfort zone. So whether at the physical, muscular level or the psychological level, stress is not a bad thing. It's just when you have extended periods of stress with no chance for breaks and recuperation, that's when muscle tissues tear. That's when post-traumatic growth can become post-traumatic stress syndrome, right? And so the takeaway, he said, was, and I'll try to use the term he used, he said, creating islands of recuperation. And those islands need to be within your day, within your month, within your year. So from vacations to just even stepping away from your desk for a few minutes or deep breathing within the day. And I thought, wow, that really spoke to me. I feel like my life has changed quite a bit professionally and personally, and I love the idea that not reframing that stress is negative, it's actually a good thing, and making sure that one has these times to recuperate, because otherwise the growth doesn't happen. It becomes just, potentially trauma.
Yeah. And no pun intended, considering his audience was the Caribbean islands, right?
That's right. Yes, exactly.
Perfect. So my next question, in the course, you also talked about your gratitude for your parents and their support along your journey. Can you tell me more about your family and the beginning of your journey?
Yeah. So, my dad worked for Air India, the airline, and that meant that every 3 or 4 years, he would be assigned a new country. He was in the commercial department. So he happened to be posted in Athens, Greece in the early 70s, where I was born. And then 3 years later, he was reassigned to Paris, France. So my first schooling experience was at École Maternelle de Paris. And then 3 years later, we moved to Calcutta, India, and that's where I'm from. I still hold an Indian passport. And so, and then it continued like that. We actually, some of the contrasts could not have been more, because after living for 3 years in Calcutta, our family moved to Switzerland for 4 years, where I did my elementary schooling. And then back to India, different city for 3. And then we spent just 1 year in Singapore, and I finished high school actually in Tokyo, Japan. So mostly my parents did try to put me in local schools, but certainly when we ended up in Japan in high school, they put me at a school where it was in English, though I learned Japanese as a second language. So I'm very grateful to, firstly, just the love and support I felt growing up. It was a nuclear family. And because we moved throughout, my brother and I are still extremely close. And my parents, I felt, did reframe these changes. I mean, every change, the definition of stress is change, right? And so it was stressful for a kid, not only moving countries, having to make new friends, adapt to school in often a different language, a new curriculum. And I did feel they did a great job of pointing out what an opportunity this was for learning, for growth, for discovering a new culture, making new friends, and not losing touch with old friends. Ideally, it's become much easier ever since the advent of the internet. Kayla, you might not believe it, but all of this happened pre-internet. So no easy way to stay in touch other than writing letters. Phone calls were really expensive in those days. But the short of it is, I felt both the love and support of my parents, I would say these experiences of moving and living in countries and truly immersing ourselves in new cultures. I feel deeply and grateful for, and I also realize that they've shaped who I am, and my view that the world is a small interconnected place. Yeah.
Wow, you moved around a lot. How many languages do you speak then?
Oh, so Bengali was my first language. I spoke exclusively Bengali till I was 5. And then when my second language was in Paris. So I spoke Bengali and French as a 5-year-old. And when we moved to India is when I first was exposed to English in school. And then Hindi was the second language in school, which is India's national language. So it was those 4 languages. And then French, fortunately, was reinforced, because in Geneva, French was again the language of instruction in school. So I had 7 years of schooling in French, which I'm very grateful for, because as an adult, I did my undergraduate in California. I studied industrial engineering at Stanford University, and I was mistaken for being from Mexico all the time, and I didn't speak a word of Spanish. But then I think it was my sophomore year spring break. I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to have someone speak to me in Spanish again and not understand a word. So I spent a week in Mexico, just across the border, and started getting interested in learning Spanish. And by the time I graduated, I was 21. I accepted a job, and my first job was in management consulting, but I took the latest possible start date, went and did an 8-week immersion program in Guatemala, just 4 hours of one-on-one Spanish a day, lived with a Spanish-speaking family, a Guatemalan family. And thanks to the French, in 8 weeks, I felt like my Spanish was pretty decent. And then since then, I've continued to keep it up. So Spanish is technically my 5th language. And I love the fact that I've had the opportunity to facilitate many workshops in Spanish now. So yeah, that's the, I mean, the reason I take so much time around talking about languages is I do feel that, just on even the level of perception, there are words in certain languages that don't exist in other languages, just the idea that people, culture does matter, language does matter, it shapes the way we view the world. And I do feel there's so much more that connects us than distinguishes us. So I think it's language and culture has given me appreciation of all these differences, but they don't supersede what really is fundamentally human about our family. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. One time I went down, I was doing my own little mini research project for fun, and I like to find words that aren't in English, but in other languages that describe a situation that can't be summarized in one word in English. And there's lots of resources out there, and it was amazing to just read some of the words and what they described and the emotions and feelings. And I thought that was really cool. So.
Yeah, language definitely, it also shows what people value in certain cultures, right? In Spanish, there's this word, como amaneciste, like how did you wake up, which doesn't quite translate in English, but
yeah.
that's another interview about language. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll move on then. Which another thing we did do in positive leadership was we dug into our superpowers or strengths. And we used a really cool tool that I had never used before. And I learned that two of mine are love of learning, hence the digging into languages, and appreciation of beauty and excellence. So the travel that you were doing as a child sounds really awesome to me, but also difficult when thinking about friends and moving schools. So I'm curious, how did traveling impact your superpowers? Do you think they developed as you traveled? Did they shift? Tell me more.
Yeah, Kayla, much like you, you've spent extended periods traveling and have been shaped by those. So love of learning comes up in my top 3 strengths when I take the VIA strength survey. The other one is curiosity, that comes up a lot. And I don't know, I think people used to complain about that when I was younger. Now I think I've channeled it into the work I do, so it's not the annoying Mohit asking more questions, but hopefully Mohit asking good questions that making us think more. And then social intelligence is the last one that regularly is part of my top 3. And I think social intelligence, part of it is, I think, needing to be a chameleon as I moved frequently. And I don't necessarily think of being a chameleon as only a positive, because it allows me to fit in, but then who am I? Am I always adapting to the environment? And I do feel I am very adaptable, but at this stage and age in my life, I think I see the social intelligence as, yes, I am flexible, I will adapt, and I try to adapt and see why am I willing to change, because I am not the same person in different cultural environments, but there's certainly the core of me that doesn't change, right? It's just I do value trying to find the strengths in different environments, and so I'm willing to adapt, and it's easy for me to do that. But social intelligence is the other one that I feel, all of these I feel have been shaped by some of that early childhood and later childhood moving around.
Yeah, I hear you getting curious about your strengths, as you say, chameleon being good at that. Okay, so you talked about how you've used them kind of in your life in general. How have you used them specifically in your professional life? How did you move from university to what was your next adventure?
So I do feel that perhaps through a couple of changes. So I wasn't always in the field of education. My first job, I was recruited out of university by a management consulting firm. And frankly, it was a good first job out of college, partly because it exposed me to certainly hard work, a lot of analytical tools and skills. I was on Excel a lot. And I also, the other thing it did expose me to is a number of different, we worked for 6 months periods with different clients, and most of them were corporate US clients. However, I feel that one of the clients was actually a nonprofit, and it was based in San Francisco. And this management consultant company, I was part of a larger team, really helped that nonprofit stay in business. And I realized that that particular intervention was one where I really felt valued. I really felt I was using my skills, and it made me realize that in some of my other project, I felt I was just one out. They could have plugged someone else for Mohit, right? I mean, I was doing the number crunching, and so that sense of really using your strengths and making a difference where perhaps if you hadn't been there, there would have been a gap, a vacuum. That sense that I had for months, right, professionally, I felt like I want to find that space. So I did feel that that would be the exception in that environment that I was working in, at least for me. And anytime I had taken a mentoring or a coaching role, I helped onboard the new kind of recruits that were recruited from undergrad. And I was like, oh, wow, I really loved the training, but that was kind of not really part of my job description. That was like 3% of what I did. And so in any case, I did take the leap to move into the field of education. And I made that now 23 years ago. I was 25 years old at the time. And the company I was working for had offered actually a very generous package for them to pay for my business school if I returned to the company. But I did feel that there was something that I would feel more that sense of flow. And so for me, that meant shifting to the world of education. And I do feel that there I've really been able to use these strengths that I mentioned, and I use them daily, and not 8 hours a day, but I do use them daily for large amounts of time. And so, I have this 6-word sentence because it's not like in the last 23 years, other opportunities haven't come where I've thought about, sometimes said yes to, and then regretted because I'm like, okay, I'm back to feeling this way that I felt before, which is I'm getting paid well, it seems stable, but I'm just not flourishing, right? Personally and professionally, I'm not using my signature strengths. So my 6-word sentence is learn and teach what I love, right? And I feel that at the Center for Executive Education, in this role of developing and delivering courses, putting together other people who can also develop and deliver, and then, creating new partnerships so we can reach more people. I feel like I get to live those 6 words and my signature strengths daily.
Yeah, that's awesome. So when you decided that education was the field where you were flourishing, more or less, I'm putting words in your mouth, I apologize, but how did you decide what to do next? Because I think sometimes people realize this and then they're like, okay, but it's a completely different field. I don't know where to start. What would you tell people who are experiencing?
Yeah, thanks for asking that, because it's not as simple. I'm not a big believer in kind of jumping without a parachute and hoping there's a soft landing. In fact, the course that I just finished teaching, we had the last session yesterday, design thinking. It's all about this concept of rapidly prototyping an idea. So my idea was, I think I'd really flourish in this field of education, but I didn't know if that was true or not, right? It was based on some experiences that I'd had, training and things. And so while working as a management consultant in San Francisco, I actually did, I think it was like a 50-hour program to get certified to teach English as a foreign language. In those days, it was called TEFL certification. And as part of the TEFL certification, I got to, on weekends, do some volunteer work teaching immigrant adults who had moved to San Francisco, didn't speak English or didn't speak English well. And so it gave me a prototype, right? In a worst case scenario, I would realize, I don't love teaching when I have to do a lot of it. And I would have spent a couple of $1,000s with the certification, which in itself was a good process. But as I did the certification, learned, a little bit more about the didactics of teaching, and then had that experience working with, and frankly, these adults were very grateful for the instruction. It was provided free of charge. I very rarely had clients at my consulting firm who were very grateful for the work I did. I mean, they got billed a lot and they expected high standards, and that was it. Well, I got a lot of thank yous, and I was like, you know what, that's lovely to feel like I'm making a difference, to get that appreciation. So that was my prototype. And then so then I took a sabbatical year from the company. I didn't just resign. They had a program where you could take some time off, unpaid sabbatical. It was for me to actually do the teaching and continue to feel that if I did it full time, I'd like it. And so at the end of that sabbatical year is when I I felt like I had to hit that soft landing. I had taken a jump, but so I would say anytime you have an idea around something you want to change, something you want to do differently, try to prototype it, try and test that idea in a cheap, quick, flexible way. So you can get some feedback and see, was this really, was my idea, when I tested it, what feedback did I get? Like, work your way into it rather than taking a huge leap, which sometimes you will still need to take at some point. Yeah.
Yeah. I've gone skydiving and I went definitely with somebody with a parachute and lessons. I would not have just jumped up by myself. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Nice. So you started the UP Center for Executive Education 16 years ago. How would you say you and the center have developed and changed since then?
Yeah, love the question. It makes me think quite deeply. One recollection I have is when I started the center, talking about sometimes you have to take a leap. I did, at that point, my wife was pregnant with our first child, and I was working at an organization where I had a kind of a regular, stable job, and I thought the timing is right for me. I need to also give birth to this idea I have, and so it was really nice because it was at a time when our first child was born, and I was in that flexible period when I was starting and launching the center. So yeah, it brings me back to that time, and so in those days, really what was most alive for me, and it was based on my interaction with UP students at the time, many of them felt that they were inspired to be change makers, but they lacked some of the more concrete tools of, writing up a business plan or proposing to the organization that they had taken a sabbatical for 1 year to go back and start something new. So whether as social entrepreneurs or social intrapreneurs start something new within an organization, they lack some of those kinds of more concrete tools, project management. How about, when you want to start something new, you often have to sell the idea, right? You pitch the idea. So how to do a pitch, how to project finances on something that is not even alive yet, how do you do this kind of cash flow projection? Because at the end of the day, a lot of great ideas do boil down to some very, very practical details in order to get them off the ground. And I thought to myself, I am so inspired by what I'm hearing in terms of the ideas. And I actually personally have that background and all of those practical skills, having been an industrial engineer, having worked in management consulting for 3 years. And so I definitely felt that there was a big need on programs that ended up being called social entrepreneurship. So how do you start a new venture that has social or environmental impact and has the kind of financial sustainability thought through? So that was, I'd say, the first half of the last 15 years, right? Really developing those courses. We still continue to offer a great diploma called Diploma in Social Innovation for all those people who still fit that profile of aspiring social entrepreneurs or people who are in organizations, want to start new projects. But Kayla, I think what you experienced in the Positive Leadership course a couple of months ago was more the second half of the last 15 years. So for many different reasons, in me personally and the world at large, there's been a lot of, I would say, a need to better understand what is well-being, what is flourishing, what is happiness. And not to say that, the field of psychology, where this comes from, doesn't continue to play a very, very important role to help people who are suffering from all kinds of mental health issues. Mm-hmm. And there's also a need to understand, what does it mean to truly get above that ground zero and flourish. And I personally just embraced and really got curious, and my love of learning kicked in for about, yeah, it's almost been a decade now, where that content and that research has informed a lot of our programs, including the positive leadership course that you took. And of course, now we have a diploma called the Diploma in Global Leadership that again is that second half of the last 15 years. So how does positive psychology intersect with leading and running organizations and change? So
awesome.
Yeah.
That sounds like a really cool balance. And I'm glad that you still kept both pieces around for who is ever looking to add to their resume. So last thing, in positive leadership, again, you also bring up Brene Brown, who I am a huge fan of and often listen to her podcast where she interviews people. And so I'm going to borrow her ending activity. She likes to ask 10 rapid fire questions. We don't quite have time for 10, but I have a couple and I've modified them a bit if you are up for it.
After a sip of whatever I'm drinking, it's like water mixed with a little juice, but yeah, ready, go for it.
Perfect. So can you finish this sentence? Leadership is?
Yeah, leadership is, I'm not a big fan of definitions, but I would say creating environments where people can flourish while flourishing oneself.
Perfect. Number 2, finish this sentence. Vulnerability is?
Vulnerability is connection. And I think it's recognizing that deep, authentic relationships are just the currency of life. And those are built on openness and the willingness to be vulnerable and connect.
Nice. My go-to response is usually hard. All right, number 3, why do you think well-being or flourishing is important?
You know, when I think about a lot of goals people have, it's about the destination. And I think well-being and flourishing is about the journey. And I think that's what makes it so important.
I like that. Okay, number 4, describe a snapshot of an ordinary moment in life that brings you joy.
Like I talking about being vulnerable, well, not really. It's. I was going to make a joke, but I don't know if it's appropriate. I think of myself of whenever I'm in water, right? And the joke was, you know, shower. So you're literally, you know, back to your original state. And I feel that's so freeing. I'm in the moment. So from showering to swimming, I'm fortunate to live not far from the ocean, and swimming in the ocean. Just joy and getting out of my head into the moment.
Perfect. All right. Number 5, what is something people often get wrong about you?
You know,
She
I
asked
would
this one and I
say
like it.
people often think that I'm a big reader, that I read a lot of books because I'm often referencing a book, and I actually find that the way I'm wired, I do better. Firstly, I listen to a lot of books, which is close to reading. I have a lot of conversations with people who also who read a lot, perhaps, and I pick up from that. And I do also just love watching talks, YouTube videos, from Google Talks to TED Talks. So reading books is not my go-to because I find it not as interactive as some of the other forums. Even on YouTube, you can go in and connect with somebody or add a comment. So I'm more about that's not a short answer though, but the dialogical process of learning.
That's interesting because you definitely quote a lot of people and a lot of books. So I would have pegged you as a reader, but good to know. All right, my last question is, what has inspired you while facilitating the positive leadership course?
Yeah, that's an easy one. So Kayla, you are, it's no coincidence that you are speaking to me now. I have, through the last, you know, positive leadership, 7 years of doing it, connected with participants in every course. And it's the reason that I continue to love doing that. And frankly, a number of them, you saw Lars, who I was co-facilitating with, a number of them have, the relationship has evolved. They've helped shape the course, they've helped shape who I am, they co-facilitated. So yeah, I've been inspired by my participants every time.
That is awesome. All right, you are done. You completed the rapid fire. Congratulations.
So Kayla, I think, you've had the chance to rapid fire some questions, and I firstly just want to acknowledge that there's so much that you have to share on all of these topics, and I'm happy in this half an hour to be the recipient of questions, but I can't help every time you ask me a question thinking, oh, I wonder what Kayla would say if I asked her. So let me ask you one rapid fire question. Okay. Having taken the positive leadership course a couple of months ago, what for you 2 months later is something that has impacted you in a way that you are either doing something differently or thinking about something differently? So that's my question. And it doesn't have to be that rapid, however long you want to.
I was going to say, I'm setting the, no, it's okay. Mm-hmm. Okay, I think for me, I went into the positive leadership course because I wanted to gain more practical skills and see where my blind spots in my leadership were or are. And one thing that it took away that I'm still finding myself remembering and applying is that a lot of the times I was thinking about the tools and things that we brought up in the context of my personal life. For example, like when we talk about gratitude, I have my gratitude practice and I enjoy that, but I never really thought about it in my professional life or how I can bring it into spaces intentionally where I'm leading. So for example, like, can we start a team meeting with gratitudes instead of just the, how are you, good, or, whatever other areas I'm in. So the 5 pillars that we talked about in the course of well-being and thinking more about how I'm doing those myself, whether I'm doing them myself is usually my first question. And then if I am, like, how can I apply those to other places and spaces that I'm in?
Wonderful. Wonderful. You get to keep your certificate.
Oh, thank you.
No, just joking. So wonderful to hear that, Kayla.
Great. Awesome. Well, it is past 1:30. I apologize. But thank you all for joining us today. Thank you, Mohit, for your time and for your thoughts and answering all of my questions, whether you wanted to or not. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to either Mohit or I. And with that, thank you. And we hope to see you for Positive Leadership starting on May 25th.
May 25th. Perfect. It goes for, I think we have 5 sessions over 1 week each. So if you decide to do that, you'd be stuck with me for 5 weeks.
No, just kidding. All right. Thanks, everyone. And see you all maybe soon.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks so much, Kayla. Bye.
Ciao.